Welcome to our bi-weekly webinar here with New Path Title and Real Trade. Glad you guys could tune in. And this is a very relevant topic today, obviously with this post lawsuit with NAR, right? And buyer brokers agreements, showing agreements, some verbiage to put in listing agreements, how we can help ourselves navigate this post litigation, this post lawsuit. And we're very excited to have this, to host this. I love doing this with Jim. One of his favorite sayings is iron sharpens iron, right? So we get to learn from each other and share different information and make our industry better. So that's a huge one. A quick thing about myself: my name is Ryan Poole. I'm a licensed agent, been doing this in the trenches with you all for over 20 years. I'm also the founder and CEO of Real Trade, online marketplace and social media platform. Jim calls it the home of the double dip. Agents can get free leads from the platform, so I implore you all to sign up and check that out. And yeah, Jim, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
I'm Jim Brown. I'm the attorney at James Brown Law and New Path Title. It's cool to me to see some new faces on here, and I've been doing this for 20 years in private practice, and my whole life I've only been in real estate and construction and general contracting and all those things. We're going to try to keep this to 45 minutes, unless people want more time. We have a smaller group. If you can turn on your camera, that's cool. I can see the responses. It saves some time because I understand whether people are getting it or not. If not, no worries. We'll have question and answers at the end, and Ryan will dump some time-saving tools on you guys to help you make more money and save time in listing and closing. And you can text me. So if you go to New Path Title, you can text me anything you want to talk about for the future, any relevant topics, or any questions you had from our show, or you can just throw them in the chat. We can talk about it at the end of the show. The topic for today is, how do you guys do business in the wake of Sitzer Burnett? And we'll talk about what Sitzer Burnett was in a minute if somebody is not familiar. Yeah. Anything you want to add before we jump into it, Ryan?
Yeah, no, obviously the future here with buyers brokers agreements, obviously we want to go over that, Jim, like we discussed, and also the showing agreement, which is another option too that the agents have, which I've been studying up on that as well, and all these other good things. So yeah, there's a lot of great information we can share with this one, Jim. Let's do this.
All right, can you guys see my screen?
Yep.
I'm going to make this available to everybody. So if you have any questions after the session, you guys can go to newpathtitle.com and get it under Realtor Resources. And I'm trying to figure out how to blow up my screen so I can see everybody.
Yeah, we can see it.
All right. So I'm sorry, I'm still making adjustments to my computer.
No problem.
Are you guys seeing the screen? What are you seeing?
We're seeing your Google Drive right now, Jim. So maybe tab over to
Stop sharing. Let's see, screen share. All right.
There we go. That zoomed in pretty big there.
Yep. Take it down.
There we go. Perfect.
All right.
Yep.
How do real estate agents do business after the Sitzer Burnett versus NAR lawsuits, October of 2023? The date of this publication is December 5th. So I just want to say that this is a fluid situation, right? You guys, I'd love to tell you that everything I'm going to tell you today is etched in stone and this is the way we're going to do business moving forward. But I will tell you in a second that all this is subject to change, but we have to do something. And so these are predictions. They're not based on any existing laws. It's just what I've been watching in the industry for my entire life and the future lawsuit outcomes that I think are going to occur. October 23rd, the jury quickly decided in Sitzer Burnett a $1.8 billion damages judgment that will render a 2024, so we're several months away from a final order. And the final order will ultimately render an order which could be as high as 3 times that, the treble damages, many, many $1 billion, or possibly something less to ensure payment occurs. The order will also likely contain a decision on how realtors will behave, conduct business in the future. These are known as injunctive orders, injunctions, or injunctive relief. One thing is for sure, the plaintiff's lawyer will make hundreds of millions, possibly even billions of dollars. That's the thing that I still stumble on, right? This lawsuit was so easy, or that team would be a fool to not do it, right? This is one of those lawsuits. It doesn't require expert testimony from people talking about material science or metallurgies or complex topics. Everybody's bought a home, so they stock the jury panel with people who have bought and sold homes. Everybody's paid a realtor commission, and it wasn't hard for them to find testimony that was damaging and jurors that would buy in. So this was inevitable, and we'll go into what we can do to avoid future problems. Highlights of the Sitzer case. Plaintiff's lawyers said, paraphrasing, "This is a refund case. We want the realtors to return the money that was taken from the homeowners through the antitrust violations." Sitzer listed his house, discounted it 10 grand to make the sale happen, and paid the buyer's agent 17 grand. When the seller asked how they could avoid paying the buyer's agent, the seller's agent told the seller that this was agreed to in the listing agreement. So Sitzer complains that the current structure cost him 27K. It was really simple. And it was it was an easy picture to paint to the jury. A Keller sales script was also shown that said if a seller wants to sell at the best price, they have to pay a cooperation commission, or a buyer's agent would steer them from showing, and it would take longer to sell and at far less. The principal argument is that brokers and agents fixed pricing schemes to drive up commissions. And the way they provided the testimony, it didn't seem like a big stretch to get to that decision, especially for not sophisticated people. I think there was better evidence that could have been provided as to why that's not the case, but it wasn't. So then there are now several copycat lawsuits pending, some many times bigger than Sitzer, even buyer's agency lawsuits alleging buyer's agents told the buyer, "I'll work for you at no charge." Some of these cases are Morrell, Gibson, Burton, and March. The copycat lawsuits, some of them are going to trial late summer of 2024. And they have judgments that 40, 80 potential judgments. The complaint amounts are 40, 80, and even $200 billion. Can you imagine the damages, the treble damages on a $200 billion verdict? $600 billion.
Yeah, 600 billion.
It doesn't, it just boggles the mind. And in one of the lawsuits, it's everybody in the United States who bought or sold a home for the 7-year period prior, which we know there's 5 million homes a year sold in the United States. Do that math. At the end of the day, in one or more of these lawsuits, it will be decided that in addition to damages, sellers paying buyers' agents is likely going away. I've sat in on several panel discussions, listened to dozens of podcasts, talked with other lawyers, and attended some Beaches realtor classes on how to do business post-Sitzer. The first lawsuits were against the industry giants. The new lawsuits are focusing on smaller brokerages, and there are even some lawsuits naming boutique, non-franchise brokerages and even real estate teams. It's only a matter of time until suits start naming individual agents. There's a recent New York suit filing that names 25 brokerages: Christie's, Caldwell Compass, Corcoran, Douglas Elliman, Volcker, HomeSnap, NetSeekers, and I don't know how Ryan Serhant does business, but he's named in there personally.
Was brokerages the Serhant? Yeah.
Is his Serhant? Is he a brokerage? Is Serhant?
Yes.
Yeah. So they're naming his brokerage and him personally. That's the first one I've seen against single brokerage, non-franchised brokerages, boutique brokerages. So the question is, how are agents affected today? The short answer is they're not. The better answer is, I mean, I've got properties and I've seen properties, everybody's still paying cooperation. There's plenty of places throughout the country. I think there's only one, I shouldn't say that, but there's one Northwest broker, MLS that's suggesting they don't pay buyer agency commissions, buyers cooperation commissions, but for the most part, everybody's still doing business the same way. And the rule has been, and it'll continue on, that you can pay as little as $1 or even zero to a buyer's agent, to a cooperating agent. It's
Yeah, the
my
Miami
opinion.
MLS just made that they just made that where you can offer zero. You could offer $1 before, but now it's
Yeah,
zero technically that you can
I think
offer.
it was since 2019, $1 could be paid to a cooperating agent. It's my opinion these lawsuits were filed years ago. The claims were well known, and had NAR talked about the potential problem sooner and slightly changed how we all do business, this would not have happened, or the impacts would have been much smaller. Bottom line, we in the industry all know a seller can pay a buyer's agent as little as $1 or even zero in the listing agreement, but the plaintiffs and Sitzer produced witnesses that showed the public does not know this. The jury bought in, and a decision was expected to take, and a decision that was expected to take weeks took less than 3 hours. So what can we do? I hear a ton of industry discussion about the answers being buyer's agency agreements. I would suggest to you this is a start, but I'm not sure how the consumer will react. And I'd like to do today's session a little differently. I'd like to open it up and discuss like how we think that this will play out. I have some ideas. If I don't know how the consumer will react, right? All the discussion I hear is about buyer agency agreements. If I were a
Yeah.
buyer, I'd probably agent shop until I found an agent that did not require this. And if I were an agent, I'd probably capitalize on other agents asking for them and advertise no buyer's agency agreements. I set in
Yeah,
and I'm just
true.
throwing it out there, you guys. I know this stuff doesn't necessarily feel good when you say it, but I think it's better said than not said, because it's like the sleeping giant. It's like, the bear that you don't poke. It's all out there. And I was in a panel of, I was in the Beaches MLS with about 200 agents 2 or 3 weeks ago. And there's half a dozen agents in the room that are insisting on buyer's agency agreements. And there's another form that Ryan was mentioning about the showing agreement. It's kind of a baby step to a buyer's agency agreement. We'll talk about that. But at the end of the day, you know that there are a lot of agents, and I'm not saying they're bad agents or good agents. I'm just saying it's a business tactic to do what nobody else is doing. And if everybody's asking for buyer's agency agreements, I'd be the
Yeah.
agent that doesn't ask for one. I mean, we all know, and we don't like, or we do like, but we all know agents that are charging 1% commissions and, you know, changing the industry. I would suggest hurting the industry, but they're changing the industry. They don't give great service. They charge 1%, but they're doing it because it's an opportunity. And I would think if buyers are agent shopping and you hit the first 3 agents, and I want to know what you guys think, and then find an agent that doesn't require an exclusive buyer's agency agreement, you're possibly going to sign up with that buyer's agent. And if you're seeing it happen in the cubicle next to you, you might consider not asking for a buyer's agency agreement just to get the business. So I don't know how that plays out.
I will say this on Form Simplicity, Jim, through the Beaches MLS, obviously you have Form Simplicity, and you can review the exclusive buyer broker agreement. I think what agents need to know, and this is going to be the toughest hurdle, right? Because I've actually tried to apply this to some of my clients, and I kind of got laughed out of the room on it. I think it kind of made it an issue when there wasn't a non-issue on for a lot of it, because it basically says in there that on the compensation agreement on the buyer's brokers that, like, the buyer could be responsible, right, for paying the buyer's agent a commission. And they're like, well, isn't that your job to negotiate, with the seller, for your commission? So right there, that was, a pretty good objection, right? Is like, isn't that your job to negotiate with the seller for your commission? And I said, well, in most cases it's already done, right, in the listing agreement. So, and what percentage, guys, and this is kind of something that I've been thinking in my own head, of like, what percentage of listings right now are active that aren't offering buyers agents commissions? I
I
mean,
never hear them and I never see them. If you guys
yeah, I
don't
don't see
see
them
it,
either. So trying to make a mountain out of a molehill right now. I think, getting to sign these buyers brokers agreements could be, a little bit of a detriment to your, to your success as an agent. But there is a stepping stone, which we'll go on later with the showing agreement. If you did come across, for instance, a property that didn't have, um, buyer's agent commission in it. So we can keep going, Jim.
I believe part of the answer to avoid future liability, however, is to adopt a listing agreement that addresses the three issues the plaintiff's lawyers argued in Sitzer and thereby helps agents and brokers stay out of future liability. So I think there's a real opportunity here. And what I'd like to do is you guys reach out to your brokers. I know Tanya's on, but I'm going to give you guys some language that I think if we include in the listing agreements, right? So if the majority of the lawsuits are formed around the seller's side. And so we're trying to craft things that keep brokers out of future liability. I think the secret is crafting our listing agreements differently. The secret is saying in as few words so when you talk about putting language in an agreement, you want to use as few words as possible to describe the situation. You want to get the legal effect out there. And you don't want to say it too briefly. I look at a ton of addendums that realtors write, and there are some great ones and there are some not great ones. The secret to writing a great addendum is to get it all out there in as few words as possible, not tell a story, and make sure that everybody's on notice of the issues, but not make it long and drawn out. So so here's a cover letter that I would propose that brokers would receive from me or whoever wants to help spread this word. And it goes like this. In light of the multi-million-dollar award to homeowners in Sitzer versus NAR commission lawsuits and the dozens of copycat lawsuits filed and to be filed, I've teamed up with a few prominent area real estate attorneys and come up with a plan to help protect brokers and realtors from continued exposure in the copycat lawsuits. We can't fix yesterday, but we can work together to keep each other out of trouble tomorrow. Since the Sitzer ruling, all the agent discussions we've heard have focused on buyer's representation agreements. Although we think buyer rep agreements are good and we provided some suggested language to help you get these signed, they won't stop the continued exposure realtors face that the plaintiffs testified to in Sitzer. When you boil it down, the principal issue in Sitzer were based on a listing agreement listing agreement disclosures and the cooperation policy and the steering that could result. More specifically, sellers testified they did not know three things. Listing agent commissions are negotiable. The obligation to pay commissions to buyer's agents is optional and variable, and they can sell their home without an agent. It sounds crazy, right? We all know this stuff, but that's what it boiled down to. So to this end, we've crafted two bodies of language, one for listing agreements, one for buyer's representation agreements. The listing agreement language will help cut off liability in the Sitzer copycat lawsuits, and the buyer rep language will hopefully help you land buyers who are happy to sign exclusive buyer broker agreements. Additionally, and in our opinion, the exclusive buyer brokerage agreement is too long and must be shorter and easier to understand. And we're going to work together with the decision makers who draft that form. So that's the cover letter that I would suggest that I would send to brokerages. And then here's the language that we would put in the listing agreement to put sellers on notice to guard against liability in the copycat lawsuits. Does everybody know what I mean by that? So you can tell everybody anything you want to tell them, but you put it in writing, they sign it. Let's just, in the worst case scenario, imagine you're named defendant or your broker, your boutique brokerage is a named defendant and you're in court. Imagine how good it would be to walk into court and say, look, here's the listing agreement. I have all my agents, all my all my sellers sign. It would cut off the argument right there. So here's the language that I would suggest you put in the listing agreement. The listing commission rates to the broker are negotiable. The amount you pay a cooperating broker is variable and optional, and you may sell your home without an agent or the MLS. So those are the things, the principal testimony that came out of the lawsuits. And we all know this is crazy, right? In the industry, we all know this is rote. And I don't even care if the people who testified knew these were the cases, that was the case, but that's what they testified to. So to avoid future liability and future lawsuits, it might seem so obvious as the nose on your face because it's so obvious to us. And it might be, but I think we have to take this step to avoid that kind of liability. And so if you get sued and the lawsuit claims you have green hair, if you don't show up and testify that you have brown hair or whatever color hair you have, the judge is going to rule that you have green hair. So if you're going to be sued in a lawsuit and they're going to claim that the sellers didn't know these things, unless you show up and you show some evidence that the seller knew these things, I don't think it's a big stretch that the jury's just going to continue making these crazy rulings. So that's what I would put in the seller's listing agreement. When they sign it, they're signing to all these things. And I'd love to know your thoughts before we move on to the next topic. Does anybody have a problem with this? Does anybody think it'll kill deals? Does anybody feel like it's a no-brainer?
I
Yeah,
do have.
Doreen asked a question. Would that affect the protection period in the listing agreement?
You mean, so you show, no, it shouldn't have any impact on the protection period. So you have protected buyers that have come by and looked at the property during your listing period. And then let's think that through. So then the listing agreement you're saying the listing agreement terminates and then a buyer comes through in the future. The listing commission, no, I don't think that would affect. Did I get the fact pattern right that you're thinking of, Doreen? That the listing agreement expires and then a buyer that you showed a property to comes through during the protected or makes an offer during the protected period directly to the seller, you'd expect a commission, right? I don't think this language affects that.
Yeah, she said yes. Yeah, I wouldn't say it would affect it either, Jim.
Yeah.
So I have a question, I guess it's open for anyone to answer, you too, Ryan, is now you have a buyer sign a buyer's brokerage agreement. You've dealt with buyers shop agents all the time, like whatever agent brings them a property, they go look at it with that agent. If you and another buyer's agent both sign a brokerage agreement and the buyer ends up using, my deal I bring to them versus yours, can you go back and sue that buyer? Now that everyone's going to be if everyone begins to use these buyer brokerage agreements, can you go back and like sue a buyer for still being in agreement with you while using another buyer's agent?
That's a great point. I mean, it's a bad luck for agents, right? So you got a buyer that's shopping around and they see Doreen and they see Jorge and they talk to Jeff, and then Jeff goes and shows them a property, but they've signed buyer's brokerage exclusive agreements with Jorge and Doreen. Sure, Jorge and Doreen have a cause of action against the buyer for that. I could imagine it. I could imagine the scenario playing out where you have but see, here's the thing. I mean, that's a really bad buyer because that's a buyer that's signing an agreement and then signing another agreement. I mean, we all know there are bad guys out there. Do I imagine it could happen? Sure, I imagine it could happen. We talk to some crazy buyers and sellers here every day at the law firm, and I hear
I mean,
stories
it could be the
you never
case they
imagined.
sign an exclusive buyer brokerage agreement with a buyer broker, right? And it was a year long, right? And they just lost touch with them and they didn't follow up, and then they go and get another buyer broker, when they get closer to the home. And you could see, according to, if you read that buyer's exclusive agreement, right, that's shared with Form Simplicity, I mean, yeah, whoever, if they sign that agreement, they could be responsible for commission for that buyer broker, for sure.
So with regard to the buyer's brokerage agreements, exclusive buyer brokerage agreements, it's a Form Simplicity form. I would suggest that there's some language we could include in that agreement to make it more palatable. So now we've gotten over the hurdle of we're going to ask buyer's agents to sign a exclusive buyer's agency agreement. What does it look like? I would suggest you have some kind of disclosure in there to soften the blow, like this. Buyer's broker shall use their best effort to have the seller pay some or all of the broker's commission. Historically, seller's agents have paid buyer's broker commissions. These fees are known as cooperation commissions and are defined in the listing agreement the seller entered into with the seller's broker. Today, many sellers are still paying cooperation commissions, but sometimes they are not. If sellers are not paying cooperation commissions, we can make a purchase offer that includes seller paying the buyer's broker commissions. If some or all of the buyer's broker commissions is paid in the cooperation clause or as a seller's cost in the contract, the broker commission due from buyer will be reduced or eliminated accordingly. However, if the seller refuses to pay, you could owe a portion of the entire buyer's broker fee. You could owe a portion or the entire broker's fee. This would be like the agreement you sign with your doctor. If insurance doesn't pay, you would owe the balance. My question is, how do you guys feel about that? I say our iron sharpens iron. I'll sit in my little cave and I'll come up with all these great tools for you guys, but I want to know when the rubber hits the road, how do agents feel about implementing this stuff?
Yeah. I'll say this because I have, and I want to hear from other agents too, is I have put this in front of a few buyers as they're reading through it. You know, what really goes to their mind is like, hey, I'm going to have to pay you in addition to the sales price, right? So that language that you share here, right, that historically that's not the case, right? We'll do our best efforts. I think that helps a lot. I
Do you
think
think it does soften the blow, Ryan?
yeah, I think it does. I mean, that's what hits hard from what the ones that I've spoken to, because I've actually put it in front of a couple of investors, right? And you know, he tells me, well, Ryan, if someone brings me a deal, I mean, they bring me a deal, I'm here to make money. You know, I mean, you know, at the end of the day, he's like, I'm here to make money, you know. I mean, you do your best effort, but you know, if someone brings me an offer, I still have to pay, you know, bring me a deal, I still have to pay you, right? So, you know, it's a delicate conversation, but I think this does soften the blow. But I'd love to hear what some of the other agents have to say about it as well.
I see Robert went off mute. You're on, or Doreen?
Yes, it's Doreen. Hi. I'm going to find this to be probably controversial, but this is going to be a little difficult to sell, in my opinion. If there's
I don't
any
disagree.
advice, you disagree?
No, I don't disagree.
Okay. Way back when I started in 2005 or 2006, I was unsuccessful as using a buyer's agent agreement. It was something that my broker instilled that I did. And flat out, I had two people, and going back when I was green and a long time ago, before this probably even was a topic. And it was, you know, I lost a couple of clients. So I, you know, being a seasoned agent, I'm trying to put myself in their shoes. And, you know, it's going to be it's going to be a sale. You're going to have to sell this. And I'm going to have to polish my selling skills to get my client to put their John Hancock on there.
I'm providing this to you guys because of the feedback I'm hearing from the industry and the regulators or the policymakers suggesting that this is what would happen, what needs to happen. I don't necessarily agree with it, but if you're working and I don't necessarily even disagree with it, I just understand the business hurdle like you're describing. That's obvious, right? It's obvious. So how do we soften the blow? How do we make it palatable? How do we, and not get, you know, I should probably even include something in here about steering. I don't know how to tactfully say that.
Yeah, steering, yes, because they will work like with somebody who pays you commission. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I think there's something that we can say in there about steering, which is something to the effect of, there's been discussion in the industry that steering is an issue and this is one way to prevent it, or something like that. But I don't know that that protects us from a legal perspective, you know, just like telling your client you're not going to steer them, but it's getting it out there in full transparency. You'll never get in trouble for disclosing potential issues. You know, the only time we get in trouble is when we don't disclose potential issues, and then the issue becomes, you know, like they testified in Sitzer where they said, oh, we had no idea we didn't have to pay cooperation commissions. Come on.
It makes you wonder though, if this document, right? The buyers makes the buyers steer themselves, right? Because I mean, if I'm a buyer, right, when you say, well, I don't want to look at properties where, they don't offer buyer's commission because I don't want to pay you. You know what I mean? I'm out of my pocket.
Yeah,
So there, the
I
steering
mean,
right there at the point. I was going to say this. Mark has a good point. He goes, this exclusive buyer agreement has to. It's too long. Most people won't read it and won't understand it. So we just need a much simpler, to the point, buyer brokerage agreement. And your verbiage touches on it very well here, Jim. Of educating the buyers of how that works. But like I said, when I said earlier, is like what percentage of listings right now aren't offering buyer brokers commissions? It's very, very small. So, you know, raising this and bringing to this points to your buyers, as Doreen just said, could be a detriment. It could be a detriment. So we're working this through, and this is why we're having this conversation.
you know what, my opinion right now, what's gonna happen, everybody will be on the seller side and they're not gonna pay buyers commission. So the seller's agent actually is gonna take care of the buyer's end. In my brokerage, that's what we do very often. So we just like really working on the seller side, but we are, without representation, but we're taking care of the buyer. So that's what's gonna happen. Nobody will pay buyers commission.
And this is my hot take, but I think that websites like Zillow and Redfin
Yeah.
will take advantage of this. And when people are no
Absolutely.
longer paying buyer agents,
Mm-hmm.
Zillow and Redfin will charge like a flat fee or something
Yeah.
like that for them to help you put together a contract and find you an inspector. I think those big conglomerates are gonna have a huge piece of the market once this happens.
It's interesting you say that, Tajay. There, a little known fact, but the Wall Street Journal and Realtor.com have common ownership interests. And prior to the Sitzer Burnett ruling, and I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but the articles are available. There were many articles published that were damning in the Wall Street Journal. In the Wall Street Journal, you would think is an unbiased news reporting agency, but there were many articles published that were slanted against the real estate industry.
Yeah.
And that leads
Robert,
into Tajay's theory. I don't disagree.
no, it's gonna be interesting. But right now, Zillow's whole model is selling leads back to buyers agents. Robert, you had a question. You've had your hand up for a while. Go ahead.
Yeah, just get to know this works. So one thing that this doesn't address, is how much the buyer's agent expects to collect in commission. Now, I know some verbiage would say, it's my broker's policy, that we charge 3%. So if the seller doesn't pay the full, 3%, then you'd be obligated to pay the balance. But somewhere in there, I think it needs to be made clear on the exact percentage that the buyer's agent is looking to collect.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. The agreement, what the language that I suggested to you guys, this is additional language that would be in addition to the exclusive buyer's brokerage agreements. And then the exclusive buyer's brokerage agreement, it has a rate. So
Yeah, it does. You can write in the rate. You can write in the rate in the exclusive buyer's brokerage agreement of what, your agreement with that buyer is, right? And then it could say in there then whatever the difference is. The way that it's written now is the buyer would be on the hook for with. So if you say 3% and it's 2%, technically the buyer would be responsible to give you an extra 1% outside of the transaction.
The problem is one of the problems is the buyer's brokerage agreement is just too long and it's just too confusing.
Mark brought that up. It's very confusing. And, there's a lot of red flags of if I was a buyer reading it that, I mean, you can assign this buyer brokerage agreement. So what now? Now there's brokers out there just getting buyer brokers agreements and then just start assigning them to other brokerages.
That's a good point. That's
I mean,
a
that
whole
could be like
business
a
in
whole
itself.
business. Yeah, that
Wow.
could be a whole business in itself. Like you're just out there having, people sign these agreements, with e-signature now, right? And then you start brokering buyer broker agreements. I mean, it's crazy,
There was a woman did you want to say something additional, Robert?
But it takes skill and confidence to execute this,
Yeah.
because as someone said earlier, the buyers could just choose to work with another agent. Now, we're in a weird time right now because it's hard enough to get listings, in general. But backing up a little bit to the seller's disclosures that you wanted to add to the listing agreement, when you start putting those thoughts in a seller's mind, um, it could cause them to hesitate and hold off on signing the listing agreement.
Sure.
And so us agents, we're in a conundrum of, we could go one or two ways. Either A, we could say to ourselves, this lawsuit, really only professionals are aware of it. The general public is not aware of it. Let's just do business as usual, because we're in a tough market right now to get listings, and we need every advantage we can get. So what are the odds of me getting sued? Probably, very little. So that's one way to think of it. Or the other way is, as you're saying, if we start implementing this verbiage on our contracts, yes, it gives us more protection. I'm 100%, confident of that. But, it's kind of like having one hand behind your back. You know what I mean? It does put us at a slight disadvantage to the agent that goes in there professional and confident that doesn't have this verbiage. Because whether it's a seller or a buyer, not only do they do business with people they like, but also they like the path of least resistance. They want the transaction and the relationship to be as smooth as possible. When we start putting all this verbiage of, this could happen, that could happen, here's a negative, scenario. I mean, I'm not saying it's a bad idea, but I'm just
But
saying
it introduces, it introduces thoughts into the seller's head or the buyer's head they would not otherwise have had.
And is that a good thing or
Yeah.
not?
No, I agree with you 110%. I won't say why I go back and forth, but I try to weigh this stuff out. And so I look back at the testimony, and had we done, let's just say NAR said this has to be in all our agreements a few years ago, whether you like it or not. There was policy drafted that said both of these, not necessarily the buyer's agency agreement, but let's just say the seller's listing agreement language that I proposed. Let's just say it was in there. That the NAR lawsuits would have been blunted.
Yeah.
If they weren't blunted entirely, they would have been significantly thwarted. They would have been significantly diminished. The wind would have been taken out of their sails. Just, to a large extent. I won't tell you exclusively, completely, but it has the effect of vacating or maybe they would have come up with new arguments right around this stuff. But these were the arguments that came out of that suit. Robert, I think your point is very well made, and it's like a conundrum for me, but I hate to see the industry, I won't say stumble along. I don't think the impact of Sitzer is immediate, but I would hate to see these other copycat lawsuits. It would be unfortunate if we didn't do anything and then these other copycat lawsuits came out that were ruled on that really hurt the industry. So that it's already been hurt.
No, I agree with you, but let's not forget, I mean, this would all be great for the agent that closes 28 transactions or more per year. Those that don't have to tolerate. But for the agent that, depending on a paycheck to pay their bills, maybe doing, 2 to 4 transactions a year. I mean, that's sad, but there are the majority of the agents.
Yeah, a lot of agents will leave the industry. That's for sure.
For them to lose a sale, I don't think that they would use this. Now, let me switch gears with you really quick. Here's something that no one has talked about, which in the back of my mind. So as you know, in residential real estate, it seems, or at least where I am up in Martin County, and Palm Beach County, real estate commissions have gone from generally 6% to 5%. Right, that seems to be the norm now. 2-3 years ago, 6% was the norm. Now everyone's doing 5%, which is again a shame. So, if the seller is paying, let's say, 5% commission, what is to prevent a listing agent from offering a buyer's agreement for, let's say, 2 or 3%? Is there anything that would prevent a listing agent from collecting 7-8% on a retail transaction? Collect 5 from the seller, and then say, I'm charging a buyer, 2%. So, not that I'm saying that I would do this, but
So you're
it does
saying
open
there's
the
a
door.
listing agreement that says 5%, and then you're saying, but no cooperation clause. But then they would separate and apart, they would get an exclusive buyer's agency agreement that said an additional 2 or something.
Yes,
Yeah.
because a lot of agents are trained. I'll be honest,
I've
like
never heard
myself.
that one, but yeah.
I've been with Mike Ferry for many years, and he would say, if you're collecting 6%, you keep 3.5, offer out 2.5. If you're collecting 5%, keep 3, offer out 2. So
I see that on the title side all the time, and buyers agents, when they see the settlement statement, like, why are they getting 3 and I'm getting 2 or whatever? I see it all the time, where the buyer's agent doesn't know they're getting less than the listing agent is.
When you guys make an offer on property, do you know, I'm assuming from the listing agreement, from the listing, what the buyer's agent's gonna get, right? If there's a cooperation clause, do you know what the seller's agent is retaining or no?
No.
that's the first thing that most agents look at when you're looking at properties for a buyer. Now, I'm not saying it's ethical or it's right, but look, we're going to be real here. The first thing an agent's going to do is look at how much compensation they're going to get. And if an agent has 3 homes to sell, one is offering a cooperating agent 3%, another one's offering 3%, and another one's offering 2.5%, or 3, 2.5, and 2. Which ones do you think the agent is going to show first and be enthusiastic about?
I'll go one step further. Why should it be unlawful for a seller to say, I'll pay $100 to every agent who brings a buyer through my property, whether you close or not?
Who brings a buyer through my property, whether you close or not?
It's kind of like I think of it kind of in terms of, guy loses his dog and he writes all over his neighborhood a little flyer and it says $100 paid to anybody with knowledge who leads to the finding of my dog, right? You don't have to just pay the person who finds the dog. You can pay anybody you want. If a seller wants to pay, here's the hang up that I have. If a seller wants to pay 10% to a buyer's agent, who is the regulating body to say you can't?
Yeah, but again, if the seller only wants to pay the standard 5%, who's to stop a realtor from charging?
I don't disagree. I never thought of this. I've had this discussion for the last 2 months, and I don't disagree with you.
Great point, Robert. It's a great point.
That's why we do this stuff, so we can hear, yeah. So
right now, there's nothing in place to prevent that, to my knowledge.
No, I would agree.
And
there's been a lot of discussion about, I think there's a MLS in, I want to say the Northeast. I tried to find the article this morning. I couldn't find it. But they are saying that if the seller is going to pay a commission to the buyer, it has to be paid directly and not in the form of a cooperation clause in the listing agreement. Unpack the mechanics on that one. And so somehow in the listing agreement, it said, in the listing statement, it says that the seller is paying directly to buyer's agent a certain fee. I'm just saying, I'm just pointing this out as an example coming from the Northeast of one way that the board is handling this situation.
Mhm.
They're being really proactive. New York and Seattle are being really proactive on this. There's some unique rules coming out of New York as well.
I want to just add this. Mark's been chiming in on the chat, and he says, a great point. He says, this buyer's brokers agreement is going to make buyers, obviously look more closely at what's being paid, right? And this could drive them more to listing agents exclusively, right? I mean, that's a great point, Mark. I mean, he made a good point of that, and I also too do want to share and just bring everybody's knowledge because this is relevant. USA Today yesterday posted an article. I put it in chat about the verdict and home sales, commissions. You might be paying too much commission. Anyway, take a look at that.
I mean, here's the reality, right? If you control the media, you control the dialogue, you control the sales. And so, unfortunately, there's an example, the one I gave earlier, Wall Street Journal and Realtor.com. There's a real incentive for the Wall Street Journal to publish information that's not necessarily casting realtors in their best light. And this is not a doom and gloom podcast. This is the issues and how do we address them. But that certainly is a big part of the dialogue. And so if you control the media, you can control, ultimately, you can have some big impact on the sales. I wanted to talk a little bit about the winners and the losers. And it's the winners that I see potentially are the bigger portals. If buyers have to negotiate and pay commissions to their agent, and then turn the internet to save money, right? That's exactly what you're talking about. Selling agents would capture both sides more readily. Zillow says they'd hate to see it. I heard an interesting discussion with the CEO of Zillow, and he says, we'd hate to see it, wink, wink, but their product, digital marketplace, is being discussed in the media. This is a pay to list service, just like they started doing for rentals a few years ago. So their digital marketplace is something that anyways, that would be a product they would throw out there. So losers, buyers who will not seek representation if they have to go out of pocket. We talked about that. And then there's some you can go down some big rabbit holes, but the MLS, if sellers feel buyers are turning to the free portals and elect to only list on the free portals without a seller's agent. And this could happen if sellers feel the absence of the cooperation commission policy stops buyers agents from using the MLS, right? So if there's no cooperation policy, what's the incentive for the buyers to use the MLS? It's a long drawn out, it's like a train wreck in slow motion. But the bottom line is, and it's complicated, but the sellers and the buyers have shown us over and over again that they want agents, right? There's digital tools that have been out there forever, but the reality is the rates for FSBOs continue to fall. But we do have to pivot and get business in the future and take action to not be liable in the future on the future lawsuits, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it would be a good idea, and I've heard from enough professionals in the industry on the law side of it, that if action was taken at the filing of the lawsuits in Sitzer Burnett in 2019, we wouldn't be where we are. And if we would, there would have been no verdicts, or if the verdicts were rendered, they would have been a lot smaller, right? So I think we all have to, in the back of our mind, we have to be thinking about doing something. I'm not sure what it looks like. These are merely suggestions. If you guys want to talk to your brokers about this, I'm happy to talk to your broker about this, and game out interim solutions. But we can expect that the Sitzer verdict will come out in late spring of 2024. And there could be this is not a scare tactic, it's just not unrealistic to think that there could be a provision in the Sitzer judgment that says that cooperation commissions are eliminated. And it's not there's another lawsuit called Morrell in March, and it's in those lawsuits, there was something about those unique to those lawsuits where the buyer's commission structure was more under fire and could be eliminated. So we'll keep you posted. It's an interesting topic. This is not, there's so many, if you go to YouTube, there are so many podcasts that discuss like the elimination of agents and changes This is a turn in the road. This isn't the end of the road. This is a bend in the road. And the other thing you have to think about, I think it's incumbent for us to think about, I'm not a newbie to this business, but you also have to think about business as a newbie, right? So if you get your license today, this is the environment you're coming into. It's not foreign to you, right? These are the playing rules that you know of. If you've been doing this business for 10 or 20 or 30 years, or 40 years like me, these are changes. So you always have to approach things with fresh eyes. And certainly as we move into the world of younger buyers and younger sellers, and the boomers age out, we have to put our minds in the perspectives of these new buyers and these new sellers. And they're not going to approach this thing the way we approach this thing. If you put a buyer's agency agreement in front of them, they might just think that this is the way business is done. I don't know. But certainly it's not the way certainly the perspective is not the perspective we've had from doing this for 10 or 20 or 30 years, or even 40. So, all right, that's all I've got. I'd love to hear if you guys have anything else you wanted to add. We're at 50 minutes. Hopefully it was educational, entertaining, and
Yeah, the only thing I'd like to just say that's on top of my mind is what we have going against us as an industry is that there's a lot of the public, a good percentage doesn't like realtors. They think of us as used car salesmen. I wish the NAR would do something to help us show our value to the public, to kind of, and it's also a shame, in my opinion, that it's so easy to get this license. Like, in my opinion, if you don't close a certain amount of transaction a year, you should lose your license or have it go dormant, because everyone in the world wants to get a real estate license because they think it's easy money. They only see that one big check, but they don't realize that to be a full-time agent, all the hours you have to put in, educating yourself, being trained, prospecting. This is a sales industry. You're a salesman, but yet we want to improve our image to show that we do bring value to the table, and it is justified to pay our commission.
Well, that's a tough. I don't disagree for a second. One of the hurdles is the media portrays agents a certain way, right? So $1 Million Listing, Selling Sunset, all these TV shows, they portray agents in a certain light, and it's easy for people to buy in. So if those jurors are sitting in the jury box and they watch those TV shows on a regular basis, no matter how much NAR boasts the necessity of agents and the value proposition of agents, which we all agree, we all know. I mean, there's tons of studies. There are multiple studies that show typical agents earn between $25 and $80 an hour. Some, it's like attorneys, right? Real estate attorneys make enough money to put their kids into private school. Personal injury attorneys make enough money to have billboards and much fancier practices. Real estate agents are the same way. You've got bread and butter agents, and then you've got these pie in the sky agents. Well, when you watch TV shows like that are available, it doesn't cast realtors in a great light. And that's part of the uphill battle. Just like car salespeople, I'm sure they're cast in their negative light their certain way, but I don't disagree with you. It's just, how do you battle the media? That's the bigger problem. Because it makes it for an interesting TV show, right? What's interesting about a person who works their butt off and makes $80 an hour versus a person who drives around in a fancy car and has a latte in the morning, plays a little tennis, shows a property, and has cocktails for the rest of the day? That's an interesting TV show. Whether it's reality or not, it doesn't matter. Perception is the law. In the court of popular opinion, real estate agents don't work hard. I sit in on enough Zoom podcasts with agents to know exactly how hard they work, and we close enough files to know exactly how hard they work. And sure, there are some agents that don't work very hard and they glide into stuff, but the agents that I work with, They bust their ass. I listen to Ryan's Tales. I know agents that show 30 properties before they even get a sale, or show 30, an agent 30 properties and never get a sale.
I agree with Robert, what Robert said. I mean, especially buyer's agents. So there's buyer's agents. Like I know Tanya, most of the time she brings us deals, she's a buyer's agent and she's on top of it from start to finish. But I also know buyer's agents that don't ever show up, don't ever respond to an email, and they're just like, oh, send my check to this address. And that's the only time you ever hear from them ever in the entire transaction. So those people hopefully phase out and there will be more, you know, honest agents that take care of their clients.
Yeah, I think the buyer's agreement is going to be in place soon, and I think it's up to you to explain how much you can, do for that
Offer.
buyer.
Right.
Yes, and then you can negotiate their like percentage and saying, hey, that's my bare minimum. I cannot pronounce how much, but I would say let's put this whatever you want and say, hey, that's my bare minimum. I can take you everywhere. We expect, and then nobody will pay us commission anymore. So that's what, if you agree, let's do it, and that's what I can do for you. And, instead of you running around, I will do this homework. I will do it for you. I will make analysis. I will offer you something. So unless you sell yourself and agree in the beginning, that's the only way with the buyers. With the seller, I think what we're going to do, we represent the seller, but we'll do work for buyer and the seller soon. For the same commission, you negotiated with the seller, and then you're going to treat the buyer as not the client, but the customer, but you're going to do the whole job for two. That's what's going to happen.
So there's a couple of interesting things that are coming out of what you just said. So buyer's agents didn't always exist. Buyer's agents were a turn of the century amalgamation. There used to be co-listing agents, and so there was an agent that went around and got all the listings, but the person who did the work was the agent who would, like the sub agent who would do all the showings. That was long time ago. And then it came to be that we had buyer's agency. That's a recent, in the grand scheme of things, the whole real estate scheme, for lack of a better word, evolved in the 1890s. And buyer's agency is not that old. I wish I knew exactly how old it was. But then the other thing that's interesting that Tanya said is, I've heard this multiple times, you don't want to be caught having commission conversations with other agents. If you're subpoenaed, if you're called in to testify, if you're called in as a defendant and you're having commission conversations via text or anything, at the Beaches MLS discussion that I went to, they would not even allow us to say the word commission in the room.
Yes,
we were referring to it as bananas. You get 3 bananas or 2 bananas. I mean, it was ridiculous. But that's one of the things that's coming out of this. I mean, the thing that I have a real problem with is, and it doesn't change how we do business, but the thing that I have a real problem is, if you're a doctor and you're going to a discussion on a certain procedure, you're going to show up, they're going to tell you how to do the procedure more quickly, more efficiently, and make more money, right? You're showing up to this association trade meeting for one reason: to make money. Why does NAR exist? To make more money for the agents. What is wrong with that, right? So that's the fundamental problem I have, is no other trade associations are being picked on because they're there to make their association stronger, more profitable, deliver better products, all those things, except for the Realtors Association right now. And maybe there are some that I'm not aware of, but that's one of my fundamental stumbling blocks is, anyways.
But just one last thing to add on what you said, it's because of how like being an agent has been like glamorified, and there's a Ryan Serhant and all these different people that like make it seem like, oh, you don't have to do anything. You can become a millionaire just by, waking up and going to go play pickleball in the morning. You get rich, so it changed everything for sure.
The other thing that comes out of this is, right, there's this idea. So a seller says, I want to get $600,000 for my house. And the day it hits the market, you get an offer. There's this perception, and I don't know how we overcome it. There's this perception that the offer came too quick and the agent didn't hurt long enough. They
Mhm.
didn't work hard enough, right? So what does that mean? That the thing lingers on the market for 60 days and you finally get your offer? Then you go, what are this agent's no good? It took 60 days to get
Mhm.
on the market.
Mhm.
It's like
Sometimes
there's
it's
no
7 days, 5 days, 3 days now.
right. So you price it properly. You get the greatest photographs. You've got a virtual home tour. You did all the right things. You hit the market. You get an offer that day, right? Oh my God, you didn't earn this. You got to give me a discount, Tanya. Or it lingers for 60 days, and you're like, oh my God, we had to spend so much money carrying this property. You're the worst agent. You got to help us with this commission. Now we had to pay the mortgage another 3 months, and there's no winning for agents. So you just have to walk in there confidently, like you do, and exactly like Robert was alluding to, it's a confidence thing. And I sit in on a podcast with a bunch of realtors up in Martin County on our group session on Friday mornings, and a lot of it comes down to confidence. So.
I'm just thinking another way to do it, like when you're doing listing, you can say, hey, let's do commission only for me, for my site, without any buyers, commission split, and see if I can find you a buyer advertising on MLS, anywhere. So if within like months nothing happens, then let's reconsider and add a buyer's commission. This way we will open the pool for all the buyers. So and maybe that's an option. If you cannot find yourself, then at least the seller say, hey, we tried and she tried on her own to find the
And
direct buyers, but no, then let's do it now.
And maybe that's a great way to get a longer commission engagement, right? A listing engagement agreement, right? So typically you do 6 months. And so let's say, okay, let's do 7 months or let's do 8 months and let's spend the first 30 or 60 days without a buyer's agency,
Exactly. Let's say, let's
buyer's
me doing this
cooperation
all the
commission.
job.
Yeah.
If I cannot provide it, we see we definitely need help with your house, and let's, reconsider our agreement, put another like 2.5% to the buyer's agent now, and then we will sell your house at the price you want. So of course, but at least he is not gonna, go sue us because
So I'm gonna
we
make this
gave him an option.
I'm going to make this
Thing that-
stuff available to you guys at New Path Title under Realtor Resources. You can copy and paste it if you want to use it. Feel free to use it. If you don't want to use it, I'm not offended. If you want me to have a conversation with your broker, I'm happy to have the conversation with your broker. I'd love to meet and educate the agents with the other agents with your broker. I mean, obviously, we'd love to have more title, committed title providers to us, and to that end, I'm dedicated to helping you guys strengthen your craft, be the best agent you can be, keep yourself out of the liability, and do the best we can do to support our agents.
Yes. Thank you, Jim, very much. That's
Yeah,
very
absolutely.
educational.
So
We'll
Ryan,
start thinking now.
what's that?
We will start thinking how to survive.
Yeah, I mean, I would say thrive, right? It's easy for me to say because I'm not the agent in the streets, but I work with you guys enough to know it's not easy. But if some agents do get out, there will be more deals for the agents that do survive, the agents that do stay in. So there's 65,000 agents in the beaches from Broward to North County, and of those 65,000 agents, 10% are productive and only 1% are like what they call hyper productive. I mean, there's not a whole lot of productive agents. The other reality is the money that the realtor boards make is grotesque. That's just reality. And the money that gets sent to the National Association of Realtors from the local boards is, again, grotesque. But I don't think that boycotting your association, the National Association of Realtors, is the answer, but there are a number of brokerages that are, and there are a number of boards that are. So it's an interesting time we live in. All right,
But
so
knowledge is power.
knowledge is
Let's
power.
meet and brainstorming. That's very important.
And the lack of knowledge is fear, and fear, it leads to unempowerment, disempowerment. So yeah, I mean, a lot of stuff that I threw out today, right? It's controversial. I've talked about this to other groups, and they're like, oh my God, no way, you're the devil. But I think you have to talk about it. And every time I talk to Ryan, he brings up something I've never thought of. Robert brought up stuff I've never thought of. I think that's good. You know, I don't do social media. This is the forum that I like to hear about what's going on. If you guys go to newpathtitle.com, you can click on 24-hour attorney support. You can get your title advances. Title advances are a way to show buyers agents that they're making offers on properties that can close quickly and more effectively. They're a way to help selling agents sell themselves to the seller. When you're going on your listing appointments, they'll also show you the listing agents that you have clear properties to sell. Ryan, go ahead. There's a million things I could say, but I don't want to take
No,
up all
awesome,
the
Jim. I can't say enough good things about New Path Title, and they're awesome, closing, software Title Leap. It's like a free contract coordinator. I use it on all my transactions. It's amazing. They keep track of all your drop dead dates. So can't say enough things with Jim. And I love hosting this bi-weekly webinar. I learned stuff today, by all you sharing information. And I've been in the industry too for over 20 years. But check out RealTrade if you're not on there. Create a profile. It's free. As we're talking about, it might go more towards listing agents, right? Where they're going to have buyers come directly to you. The nice thing is you own your listings on RealTrade. So when you create a profile, we import all your listings for you. And now you're the point of contact. So you do have a chance for double dip. But there is people on there that are looking for buyer's agents. They can actually search you out on RealTrade and find out buyer's agents. We have agents that are getting free leads too that way as well. So it's a great way to also connect with awesome service providers. Not only a marketplace, we're a social media platform. You can connect with Jim, other awesome lenders like Jeff that's on the call. He's a lender on RealTrade. You can connect with him. We got inspectors, appraisers, contractors, so it can help you in your real estate business. So get free leads and help sell properties quicker. Check that out. So, hey, we love hosting this bi-weekly webinar, Jim. You did a great job today. We had a
Yes,
great
thank you so much.
great discussion. And
Thanks,
yeah, let's
Ryan.
keep
It's hard to
moving the
bring
ball.
up controversial stuff. I'm glad you guys were open and interactive. And yeah, I mean, there's plenty of people that I've talked to that are so close-minded on this stuff. So I appreciate it.
Mm-hmm.
All right, you guys have a great week.
You too.
List lots
Great.
of property, sell lots of stuff, and let me know how we can help.
Thank you, Jim, very much. Mm-hmm. Bye-bye.
Thank you.